I always think it's rather interesting that when Nigel Farage was asked where his name came from, that he explains that it's a French Huguenot name. Now, Huguenots came here from France in the tens of thousands at the end of the 17th century after the Catholic kings of France reneged on a treaty struck between the Catholics and Protestants years before, and the Protestants, the Huguenots, fled, and they found a welcoming home in England. And they were welcome partly because they were incredibly industrious, and they boosted our economy, and they brought skills, and they built energy, and it was part of the great economic explosion that turned England and then Britain into a world power. And Mr. Farage's ancestors were part of that great wave of immigration from France and across Europe. And it seems ironic that 300 years on, one of their descendants is trying to pull up the drawbridge behind them. That sort of, I'm all right, Jack, pull up the ladder behind you sort of attitude. Well, we've become what we've become as a country because of the contribution that immigrants have made. People say immigrants put pressure on employment, on housing, on schools, on our health system. And sure, there are pressures on all of those things. But equally, there are ways of taking the pressures off those things which don't involve demonizing people who've come here with honest intentions to make a contribution because they think that this is a great country to live. I think when we talk about immigration, we need a debate that isn't covertly about people's prejudices. And there are some people who are hijacking this debate and playing on people's understandable fears because they fundamentally have a problem with people who are not cookie-cutter copies of themselves. Well, I don't. I really like this country's diversity. A few years back, I went off down to the West Country and I stopped off to grab something from a supermarket in Totnes. And I was looking around and I was thinking, there was something weird about it. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And then it struck me. And that was everybody in the place, everybody in the supermarket was white. And my immediate reaction was, oh, how boring. And I think we should stop to think just how much we gain from the fact that our neighbours might have origins in Africa or the West Indies or the Indian subcontinent or East Asia, all those parts of the Commonwealth which were the empire in which we ran and where people have come from and made our country just that much more interesting and have brought new perspectives, new ways of approaching things. And they haven't just brought diversity. Typically, people who've moved to this country from abroad pay in more than they take out. They're net contributors. They're not net drains on the system. What parties of the right have always done is used fear of foreigners, fear of the unknown, fear of minorities, fear of difference to distract attention from the real issues. Back in 2007, 2008, we were all absolutely clear in our own minds who'd caused the crisis. It was the 0.1% at the top, the people who run the banks. And now, 7 or 8 years on, lots of people seem to have forgotten that and think that all the problems we face are really down to disabled people or claimants or immigrants. Well, nothing's changed. It's still the same people at the top. It's still the same people who cause the problems because they have the power to cause the problems. And they play with so huge amounts of money, such huge amounts of money, and for such high stakes. Let's stop blaming the 1% at the bottom. Let's hold the 0.1% at the top accountable. No one's saying they should be hung from lampposts or anything silly like that. Many of them do decent, useful jobs. But the thing with the crisis was this. When the banks have good times, they enjoy the fruits. When it goes bad, we pick up the tab. It's what they call privatization of profit and nationalization of risk. It means that we pick up the downside and they get the upside. Well, let's focus on that And let's not give people a hard time because of the colour of their skin or the fact they moved here from Eastern Europe or they're somehow different, because that's the coward's way out.